This is Rich Franklin, and you're listening to Stand and Bang.
Hey, this is Jim Miller, and you're listening to Stand and Bang.
Hey, this is Dan Miller, and you're listening to Stand and Bang.
Hey guys, this is Hurricane Heather Jo Clark, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
Hey, this is Max Dennis Holloway, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
Hi, I'm Andrea KGB Lee, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
Hey everybody, Bob Goodman here. You are listening to Stand and Bang. Boom!
Hey, fight fans, welcome back to another edition of Stand and Bang Radio. I'm your host, Aaron Robbins, and with me as always is Mark Modeski.
Hi-yo.
And Fred Kirby from Gem City Fighting.
Hey, what's happening, fellas?
And our special guest tonight is UFC middleweight Smilin Sam Alvey. Sam, how are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. How are you guys today?
We are doing well, I believe. Thank you very much for taking time for us. And before we get started with the formal show, I just want to give a shout-out that I haven't given in a while over to Jamie Skipper and the guys over at Unique Kennels. They are the official bulldog of MMA. Go ahead over to Twitter at Unique Kennels 71 or on Facebook Unique Kennels /Conway to check out the quality English bulldogs they have. They do a bunch of sponsoring of fighters, and a bunch of UFC and Bellator fighters have their English bulldogs, so kind of a big deal. So go over there and check them out. And without further ado, guys, why don't we go ahead and check out the relevant MMA news this week? We had a fight night, Mendez versus Lamas, and so we are going to gain all of our news topics from there because I think they're all relevant. And I believe for tonight we are going to start off on the subject of poor sportsmanship. Last night we heard the F-bomb heard round the world when Mr. Iaquinta was not very happy with the crowd booing him. I believe that the crowd was booing the decision, not him. I understand it was the heat of the moment, but he had a few choice words, and so it kind of leads me into the whole poor sportsmanship. So I want to get everybody's opinion on the worst cases that you can remember of worst sportsmanship. And of course, Sam, on your side, you might actually be able to give us some personal anecdotes about that, and then kind of how it affects the sports, or how it affects the sport itself, maybe the audience, because I know me and the guys have talked about how it affects us, and so I kind of want to get everybody's opinion. So for me, the worst cases in recent history, obviously you've got Paul Daly hitting after the bell. You have Brock Lesnar telling the crowd what he thinks about Frank Mir and horseshoes and everything like that. Then just recently we had Claudia Gadelha hit after the bell and then kind of give a half-hearted opinion about that, or a half-hearted apology, sorry. And then last night, I'm of the opinion that the fans pay for a ticket. Do you know what I mean? So if the fans boo you or they love you, you know what I mean? As a professional, you kind of have to shake it off of your shoulders. That's not how Al Iaquinta thought last night, and so we got the big F you to the crowd. Sam, I want to hand it over to you first. What do you think about the poor sportsmanship going on, worst case scenarios, and if you think it affects the sport at all?
I don't know that it affects the sport that much. Everyone kind of understands that there's the heat of the moment. Our adrenaline's pumping. We just got done doing something most people don't get to do. But it's not called for. He has to understand that those fans are the reason he has a place to fight. It's because of them, whether they're booing or cheering, that he has a job. And then to tell them to F off like that, it's kind of ridiculous. You've got to have more respect for them. And at the end of the day, they're not there to hear you talk. They're here to see you fight. If you were to just, get your hand raised, walk off the stage, they'd be just as happy. It's kind of like actors. Actors run their mouths too much too, it's not called for. Do your movie, do your fight, and shut up.
All right, that's a good opinion. Now, in your career, I know that you had a pretty decent, very decent amateur career, and now, of course, you're in the UFC. What would you say, if you had to give an example, what has been the worst case of sportsmanship that you've run across?
There was a promotion in New Zealand, and if you look, every time I fight, they announce my record. My record on SureDog is on, what am I now, 25-6. Well, I fought in New Zealand once, and I was absolutely robbed. That's why every time they announced it, I said, no, I'm 25-5. I didn't lose that fight. Throughout the fight, the guy, was low. I think it was 2 low blows, 2 eye pokes. They had a point taken away from him. At one point, they actually stopped the fight because he had a corner or family member, whoever, they were surrounding the cage. And then I still lost the fight. And it was ridiculous. And it wasn't so much my opponent that was the poor sport. He was just there to fight. But the promotion just ran it terribly. They met with me afterwards. Hey, you know what? It was terrible. We'll take care of it. We'll get this worked out. We'll have people look at it. It'll be okay. And I said, okay, if that's what you say. And then I flew home, and when I landed, they had already gone on the internet and talked about how, nope, actually the eye pokes didn't happen, so we're re-giving my opponent the points. And it was just frustrating because we fly to his backyard, we put on a good performance, and then we get robbed with it. So it wasn't so much my opponent that was the poor sport, it was the promotion. They wanted to have the guy that fought and beat Smilin Sam. It really, to this day, it still, sticks in my craw.
Okay, so you said you were over in New Zealand, you got low blow twice and eye poke twice?
Yeah, I'd have to go. It was eye poke twice, and I know I was kicked low at least once. Okay. But I think I remember a second one, too. It happens to me all the time. If you look at my career, I had like a 9-fight streak where I got kicked in the boys.
Huh. So was the name of the fight over there No Balls Are Safe?
It must have been. Because he hit me hard.
Yeah, it's hard to forget something like that. All right, Mark, I'm going to throw it over to you on the old poor sportsmanship. What did you think about Iaquinta last night? Kind of telling the fans what he thought, and do you think it has any effect whatsoever on the sport?
I kind of agree with Sam, I think, in that, it's a heat of the moment kind of thing. You've got all that adrenaline pumping through your blood and everything, and sometimes it can be kind of hard to put a filter on it, and you just kind of let everything fly out of your mouth at a particular time. So, things like that, they happen sometimes. I think the real displays of really poor sportsmanship, the one that always sticks out the most with me is the Paul Daly, Josh Koscheck one, where he actually got the hit after the bell. I mean, I think things like that can kind of be bad for the sport, to be honest with you, because it doesn't really, it reflects a really bad sort of image overall. That's kind of my take on it.
Okay, well, that's a good take on it. Now, Kirby, I know you and I talked about it, so I'm going to let you wrap up the poor sportsmanship.
Well, I agree with Mark in that nothing tops a sucker punch after the bell. So Paul Daly's always going to hold that title as, the infamous guy with the worst sportsmanship ever. As far as Iaquinta goes last night, I do understand what everybody means as far as him being highly emotional. He just fought in front of a lot of people. But as Sam said, he has to understand these fans paid for their tickets to get in there to have an opinion. First off, I highly doubt that any of them was actually booing him or his performance. Nobody agreed that he won that fight. So they were booing the decision. But for him to get upset about it was just kind of immature. And then, listen, man, he's on Fox. That's a big deal. Like, he's got to know that he can't just say whatever he wants in that moment, man. He's got to be able to censor himself a little bit on a stage like that. So do I think that it reflects poorly on the sport? Yeah, kind of. On that platform, I can guarantee you Dana White wasn't too stoked about that. There was probably some little kids watching that probably wasn't greatly influenced by dudes spazzing out like that. So, not really a great thing, no.
Okay, so I can see that we're kind of agreement that there was a heat of the moment. Maybe he should have had a little bit of forethought and just said, you know what, I'm not going to talk at all, or maybe just blown it off. I'm sure that our esteemed guest tonight, Smilin Sam, would have had a lot better things to say. I liked his last post-fight where he said, yeah, I just let the guy kick me until finally I punched him in his face and he fell over. So, I mean, a little bit of humor, I can understand that. Maybe, you know what I mean, warm up the crowd. And I agree with you, Kirby. I don't think that the crowd was booing him himself. He put in a great fight. Both guys did. I think that it was missed, the boos were towards the judging, and he just kind of misunderstood that. So why don't we go ahead and continue on this subject, because in my opinion, and Mark, I know you and I have talked about it, Kirby, you and I have talked about it, let's go on to bad judging, because the three of us all agree, and I'm pretty sure that every single person in that arena agreed that Al Iaquinta did not win that fight. It happens. It was bad judging, and that's what we're going to talk about now is bad judging. My concern is how often it's happening, and now we're starting to see different places like Texas, for instance, and other smaller venues where we're starting to see this, I wouldn't want to say biased judging, but very, very bad judging. And then I'd also like to touch on what can be done, because I know we have our opinions on what can be done. So, Sam, I want to get your idea about how detrimental bad judging can be, especially with the Reebok thing coming up and every fight loss makes a difference. How often do you think it's happening, and what can be done perhaps to fix it in MMA?
I think it's a terrible problem, and I don't see it getting better anytime soon. I don't see the steps being taken. But personally, the two things I would like to see, one, I would like the main cause of a fight being won or a round being won being damage. Right now, damage isn't in the scorecards. It's effective striking, effective grappling, ring control, stuff like that. But damage actually isn't, and I think that should be the number one criteria for winning a round or a fight. The other things, I would like to see some past fighters become judges. They don't have to be every judge, but tell me Matt Hughes wouldn't be a great judge, or George St. Pierre, or anyone that used to fight. Somebody that's been in there kind of knows when a choke is effective and when a choke is just stalling. So I think those two things could take care of a lot of the judging problems we have now.
Okay, now on the same note, do you have a personal story, an anecdote where you kind of, besides the New Zealand no balls or safe fight, have you been affected by blind judges? When you got Ray Charles over on one side and Stevie Wonder on the other side judging the fight?
I've got two. The first one, well, the most recent one was back when I was with Bellator. I fought Vitor Viana. And it was a decent enough fight. It wasn't the greatest fight I ever had, but I won the fight. But not according to the judges. And that was the first round of the tournament. It cost me $10,000. It cost me the second round of the tournament. He actually came up to me afterwards and said, "Hey, you won that fight, but I'll take it." So he was cool enough about it afterwards, and I took it and said, "Well, I can't let it go to judges." But then there was a second time that it actually went to my favor. And to this day, I still don't think I won the fight, but the judges said I did, so I'll take it. I fought Jason Guida, and it was at a 205, so I actually went up to fight him, and then he missed weight by like 20 pounds. I'll bet you when he stepped in the cage, he was 230. I weighed in eating a sandwich. I mean, and he picked me up round one. He picked me up. I mean, it wasn't even a shot. He just picked me up, carried me over to his corner, slammed me into the ring post, and then took me down and spent the rest. I spent the rest of the round trying to survive. Luckily, he kind of gassed out, and so round two was my one. I won. I busted his nose up. I started winning. Round three, he went back to. He was just leaning on me, kind of. He's just so big, and he's not a bad fighter. He was leaning on me. He never got a takedown, and I think that's why I won that third round, or at least two of the judges said. But I don't think I won that fight to this day, and he was upset about it because he was on a bit of a losing streak before then. Sure. But so those are really the two decisions I've had that have been affected my career one way or another.
Okay, it's interesting because you bring up Jason Guida being heavy. I think that is definitely something that has threaded through his entire career. We got to see that very publicly on The Ultimate Fighter. And now you bring up something else, and this is the first time I've been able to ask a fighter this. You knew that you won one fight. You also are very brave to admit that you know that you probably lost that fight. When these guys go to decision, how much do you think is kind of posing or playing to the crowd, and they know that they lost the fight and they were gifted a decision? Do you know when you're in there in the heat of the moment, do you know if you won or lost?
Often enough. I mean, there's always those close fights. But when I fought Vitor Viana, I knew I won that fight. I knew I didn't lose it, and that was the same thing for my New Zealand kicked in the balls fight. I knew I won those fights. There was no doubt in my mind. And then they announced the other guy, and it's just heartbreaking. Going into the Jason Guida one, I sold it. As soon as that third bell rang, I jumped up like I was king of the world. I was, yeah, I'm the greatest ever. Oh, I just crushed this. I mean, just celebrating. I mean, but in the back of my head, like, I just lost this fight. So I hope I sell this enough. And two of the judges saw it. And you know what? It was a close fight, or it was a close third round. Maybe I did, but in my head I didn't. And I did everything I could for the next, until the scorecards got collected to convince them I won.
Okay.
Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't.
Okay, well, I appreciate your honesty. That's great to have somebody on here who's honest. And now, Mark, I'm going to throw it over to you. we both know about bad judging. In your opinion, what can be done? What do you think? What do you have ideas? What do you think would be good for fixing the problem?
You know, Aaron, I've thought about this one a lot, and I don't know what the exact solution is. I really like Sam's suggestion of having maybe more professionals, MMA professionals involved within the judging process down the road. Like you say, like people who are real sport academics. I mean, go above and beyond former fighters. I mean, look at some of these like clinical guys who are coaches and whatnot, like the Greg Jackson types, you know, whenever he kind of calls it a day, because there would be some obvious potential bias there. I really like that idea, and I think that could potentially work. I think, unfortunately, it's going to be an indicative problem for a very long time within the sport, given that there are these short fights, especially, or short fights, 3-round fights. There's going to be these times where it comes up where, you know, it's so easy for a decision to go the wrong way. I mean, I know we've seen bad decisions in the 5-round fights too, but I think sometimes we still hear bad judging in boxing and stuff like that, but when there's 12 rounds or what have you, maybe some of that gets a little bit washed out throughout the process, some of those rounds that maybe were miscalled or what have you, but it's a tough thing to manage, and without better education, that's where it all starts at the end, when all's said and done.
All right, well said. Now, Kirby, I know you and I have talked about it, and I think we kind of touched on a couple of subjects. I want to get your idea, what you think would fix the judging problem.
I mean, it's a major problem, so it's not going to be something that gets done overnight, one way or the other. I would like to see some kind of test implemented, man. I don't know how realistic something like this is, but just like some general tests that these cats would have to take to be mixed martial arts judges, just some general knowledge that they know a little bit about submission grappling or a little bit about striking, and be held more accountable too. When you get some of these kind of crazy decisions like this, it'd be nice to see these cats get held accountable. Whoever the two cats were that scored that fight wrong, they should be held accountable in some kind of way for that. It would be nice to see guys inside the industry get their chance, ex-fighters, coaches, but you're always going to have the problem of, personal interests. They're going to be, fighters that they trained with or that they coached. So you're always going to have that weird kind of stigma there to where it's going to be an issue if you've got somebody like that, judging a fight of somebody they trained with in 10 years. So it's going to be an issue. I think that it's not going to be something that changes overnight, but you got to do it in slow steps and just try to get these guys taking some kind of tests that make sure they know what they're doing when they're judging high-level fights.
Okay. Now, I'm going to agree with Sam, and I thought that, Kirby, you and I have talked about it, so maybe we'll have to talk about it again after the show. But my whole thing is damage. You're in a fight, and I think that it's fine if you want to judge a round, that's fine. But at the end of the day, you have to judge the fight as a whole, kind of like Pride did. Now, we both know that if we were in somebody's backyard and I walked away with a busted nose and I can't see out of one eye and the other guy is going to go get some drinks and hang out with his girlfriend, I lost the fight. You know what I mean? There's no two ways about it. Kirby, what did you say BJ Penn said after he fought George St. Pierre?
I think it was something along those lines. He went to the bar and George went to the hospital. So, in their first fight. Yeah. Clearly he didn't go to the bar in their second fight.
No, he didn't. But no, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, it just needs to be a fight. Okay, I understand that there is 3 stanzas. That makes sense. And sometimes if it's very, very close and both guys look busted up or both guys look beautiful after the fight, sure, we got to break it down by 3 rounds. So education, yes, but also damage and judging it as an entire fight. That's where I would like to see happen. So before we close on the news subject and go into our first break, I just wanted to bring up a quick thing from the fight as well. Clay Guida, after his fight, he said, a few funny things and a few poignant things. And one of the things was he kind of called out the crowd and said to the crowd who doesn't enjoy wrestling, you're missing out on a great sport, this and that. And I think he's confused. I think the modern MMA fan is savvy about good wrestling. I think the modern MMA fan is also frustrated by, say, lay and pray. And I think that, or stalling. And I think that is, I think that's more where the crowd is now. I don't think it's that we don't enjoy wrestling, because I do enjoy wrestling. But I want to get Sam's opinion. Do you think that the MMA crowd is, the UFC crowds are savvy enough to know the difference between good and bad wrestling, or do you believe there is a bias against wrestlers?
I think there is a little bit of a bias against wrestlers. I think fans understand it more than they ever had before. They understand jiu-jitsu, they understand wrestling, things that, 20 years ago they had no idea what was going on. I think they understand it now, but I think they still prefer knockouts. I think they still prefer two people going in there and just swinging at each other. And I enjoy wrestling too, but I'm not gonna lie, I like the threat of a knockout over the threat of a takedown. And I think more people are like that. When I'm fighting, typically my goal is knock the guy out. A great submission is awesome, but I know what people are going to remember me for. They're going to remember my fight being the fight where that guy got knocked out. That guy was willing to get knocked out. And I can understand. I can understand why people would enjoy the knockout more, but that's coming from me. Where my jiu-jitsu game isn't my strongest suit.
Okay, well, once again, thank you for your honesty. On that note, we're going to go ahead and go to our first break. We're already over time here a little bit, so you've been listening to Stand and Bang MMA Podcast, and you can actually now find us on standandbangmma.com.
Hey, this is Will Brooks, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
I'm Lance the Party Palmer, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
This is Paul the Irish Dragon Felder, and you're listening to Stand and Bang.
Eddie Sub Gordon, and you're listening to Stand and Bang.
Hi, this is Smilin Sam, and you're listening to Stand and Bang.
Hey, fight fans, welcome back to Stand and Bang. I'm here with Fred Kirby.
Hey, what's happening, fellas?
Mark Modeski.
Hey, how y'all doing tonight?
And Smilin Sam Alvey. Sam.
Hey, how you guys doing tonight?
Well, I think we're all doing well. Is that right, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm doing all right.
All right, fantastic. So this is the quote-unquote interview section of the show. So, Sam, we're going to go ahead and sit down with you and get to know you a little bit better for your fans, kind of get an intimate feel for Smilin Sam Alvey. How does that sound?
Oh, that sounds amazing.
All right. Here we go. So, since you are, I wouldn't say new to the scene at all, I know you have an amateur championship that you're very proud of, and I know that you were on The Ultimate Fighter, and now you've had a couple of fights in the UFC that have ended fantastically, but there are a lot of fans that don't know your entire story. So we're going to start off basically. Why don't you tell us your story? How did you get in? How did you get into the fighting thing? How did you progress? And then how did you find your way over in the UFC? Why don't you tell us that story?
Okay, it's buckle in. It's a little bit of a long one at this point. I've been in the game for almost a decade now. But yeah, it all started. I was in college and I needed something to do, and I'd never trained MMA. And honestly, I never knew what MMA was. Somebody said, "Hey, we got a cage. You want to fight in it?" I said, "Yeah, that would be fantastic." So I went down to. It was the XFO was actually my first show down in Northern Illinois. I went down there and I was just a Wisconsin boy thinking, hey, I could beat anyone at any point. I didn't think there was anything to it. And I went out into the cage and round one went awesome. But I didn't know the rules. So I busted this boy's nose. I knocked him down and I said, yeah, that's all. It's great. Well, I didn't know I could jump on him. So he got back up and the round ended. And, round two didn't go nearly as well. He decided that he didn't want to punch with me anymore. He wanted to take me down. So he grabbed me, jumped on top of me, and 30 seconds later, the ref stopped everything. And that was my introduction to MMA. And I was hooked after that. And actually, funny side story on that incident, it was an outdoor fight, and the mat was so incredibly hot. I mean, it was just burning the snot out of my feet. Between rounds, I actually ran back to my corner. I sat on my butt. My girlfriend at the time was not my dad or my cornerman. Said, guys, I need ice. So through the cage, they weren't allowed in. They were putting ice water on my feet. And that was as soon as the fight ended, I crawled back to the corner. Said, I need ice on my feet again. And so that was that fight. And I was hooked. I said that was awesome. It was a heavyweight fight. I was 215 or something at the time. The other boy was a little bit bigger than me. But like I said, I was hooked. It's like, this is the greatest thing ever. Still no idea that there was a UFC or people that actually did this. So I found the guy that ran the show. Said, hey, when next one? He said, all right, this is the next one. I said, all right, sign me up. I'll be there. So I don't know. A couple of weeks later, I drove back down, and after all my bumps and bruises healed up. And they said, all right, this is the opponent. I said, okay. Then like 10 minutes later, I said, all right, your opponent's gone. We've got something new for you. I said, okay. So they put this boy in front of me. I'll bet you he's 350 pounds. He's just a big dude. My dad looked at him and said, all right, Sam, we got two options. You're either going to stay away from him for a long time and then attack, or you're going to go at him right away and see what happens. I said, okay. So we went out there and I went at him right away, and I knocked him out in 12 seconds. And so now, second fight of my amateur career, and I've got both the win and the losses. And it was like, oh, this was awesome. Had a couple more fights. I think my next fight was King of the Cage, and I swear I'm not going to take you through all my fights. It's just my amateur career. Couple more at King of the Cage, and then I got a call from Dave Sixel, who had something to do with King of the Cage, or at least I thought. He said, hey, you won your last fight and stuff. We got a call from Russia. Would you like to fight in Russia? I said, okay, I can fight in Russia. So they flew me out to Russia. I didn't know who I was fighting, or I didn't know anything. But we had just an awesome time for 2 weeks out in Russia, and then the end of the trip was when we fought. I was the last guy of the American team. There were 4 of us, and then a coach. Last guy to fight, and they announced me, Sam Alvey, with an amateur record of, I think I was 3-1. And they said, hey, Russia, I'm here. And then they called out the other guy, and big Russian guy with a record, I swear to God, they said 33 wins and 1 loss, and the champion of Europe and Asia and Japan. It's like, ooh, so they have this in Asia, Russia, and Japan. So, and I beat him. It was, looking back on what MMA is now and was then, it was probably a boring fight. He kept trying to take me down, and I just didn't let it happen. I hit him just enough, and the rules were actually, it was 2 rounds. But if it was tied at the end of 2 rounds, it'd go to the 3rd round. So we went to the 3rd round, again, defended every takedown, and I ended up with the win. And it was like, oh yeah, and I was the only American to win that night. And so the crowd loved me, and I still don't know who the Russian boy was that I fought, but he was okay with it afterwards too, and had a great time. We got back from Russia, back in Wisconsin, I want to say Monday. On Wednesday, I got a call from Dave Sixel. Hey, Sam. Oh, and by the way, Russia was a 205 fight, or 88 kilograms. It wasn't heavyweight. But I got a call on Wednesday then. I got home. He said, hey, Sam, there's a big tournament King of the Cage is putting on. You want to fight in it next weekend, next Saturday, 3 days from now? I said, yeah, sign me up. And so I got up there, and it turns out that was a heavyweight tournament. And I was the smallest guy in this tournament by, I'll bet you, 50 pounds was the next small guy. And I just tore through the tournament. Put me up with the first guy, knocked him out. So yeah, put me up with the second guy. I actually submitted him with strikes. I was hitting him just everywhere, and he tapped out. Then 3rd round was the biggest boy in the tournament. He was supposed to win it all, and he beat me up round 1. Round 2, we changed tactics a little bit, or at least in my head I did, and he started beating me up again, and then I stopped him from beating me up in my head. I landed, he pinned me against the cage, I landed some elbows, and he went down after that. And so I won this tournament, and King of the Cage said, hey, since you won this tournament, we're going to give you money, and you can fight for us again. And that was the first time I realized I could get paid for this. I said, oh man, I can do what I would easily be willing to do for free, and get paid for it. I said, yeah. And that started my professional career. Then 23 fights later, I ended up in the UFC. I fought around the world twice, and I've just loved every minute of it. It's not the most lucrative sport in the world, but the places I've been, the people I've met, and the things I've done are just they're immeasurable. I'm a huge fan of this sport. I'm a huge fan of the people, the fans, the people I've met in different countries that I've been to, and I'm really looking forward to, let's say, the second 2/3 of my career here in the UFC.
All right, fantastic. Now, speaking of and that's a crazy journey, Russia and back in Wisconsin and here and there all over the world, and now you find yourself over with Dan Henderson at Team Quest. How did that come about, and what do you feel that's doing for you at this point, being able to train with an absolute legend of the sport?
I'd beaten everyone in Wisconsin at 205, and a tournament came up, and a buddy of mine wanted to fight 205, so I cut to 85, and I pretty much beat everyone in the state at 85, and I was just out of places to go. So I honestly, my wife was actually, she's been in my corner the whole time, lead chief corner. She's kind of run my career a little bit from behind. her. And she said, Sam, you need to go somewhere else. You need to get out of Wisconsin. You need to find somewhere. And we said, okay. He said, if somewhere in there I learned that MMA was a thing I could make a career. And I graduated college somewhere in there too, just for background info. But she said, you got to go somewhere. And this was a little bit after she won her show, her America's, what was her show? America's Top Model, that's what it's called. She won that, and so we were looking at markets that she could work and I could work out. So it's kind of between Coconut Creek, Florida, and Team Quest, California, LA-ish. And so we kind of just started driving south, and Team Quest answered. Heath Sims actually answered. So, we were driving south, we just took a right, and we ended up in Temecula. Since that time, I've beaten some of the best in the world. I've competed on all the biggest stages. I was the world champion up in Canada, and now I'm knocking people out in the UFC. Dan Henderson brings a level of talent and skill to the sport that you just don't see that often. He's a man's man. He's a fighter's fighter, and he really breeds that in all of us. I've always been the kind of guy that if you offer a fight, I'll say yes. I've never said no to anyone, and he does too. I mean, somebody offered him, hey, you want to fight the very best in the world at heavyweight, Fedor? And, he said, yeah, okay. He said, you want to fight the best in the heavyweight DC Cormier, Olympic champion or Olympic this and that? He said, yeah, okay. And he's really just instilled, you work hard enough, trust yourself, trust your training, and you'll go far. And so I wouldn't be where I am today without the coaches here. Brian Harper, lead MMA coach, Ricardo Feliciano, the head jiu-jitsu coach. Daniel Warren was my Muay Thai coach for a long time. Now we've got Isaiah Alvarado. I think I said his last name right. And then Hendo's there every day too. So we've got just some of the best coaches in the business who have trained people from nothing into UFC superstars. And I wouldn't have had the career I've had without them.
Well, it's absolutely amazing to be training over there with Hendo, one of my favorite fighters, absolutely, and you're absolutely right, a fighter's fighter, a man's man, and that kind of brings me, you're getting all of this skill set, but we know what you're known for. You are known for that knockout power. When did you realize that you only had to touch somebody one time? Is that just natural for you? Because it's kind of unassuming. You see the way that you look and the big smile, and then, one hit and they're gone. And then why don't you tell us a little bit about that and who the next victim is on your list?
The way I started hitting as hard as I hit is most of my career back in Wisconsin. So at this point, I was still half my career was in Wisconsin. I was self-taught. Everything I did was my own style. So I'm sure I did everything wrong. And my dad, from fight number one, before fight number one, he said, if you're going to punch a guy, you're not aiming at his face. You're aiming at the back of his head, but you got to get there through his face. And every punch I throw is got that in mind. He said, I'm not trying to hit his face. I'm trying to tickle his brain. And that was training myself. Everything I trained was, I'm not hitting the bag. I'm trying to break the bag. I'm not doing this to my training partner to break this. And so I get out into the fight now, and I'm not trying to do something a certain way. I'm trying to get the result. I'm not trying to get the process. It's worked out really well for me. Now that I've moved out to Temecula and had some real striking coaches outside of, myself, I've changed little things, but it's more little setups to hitting the guy really hard. So after my last fight against Cesar, the plan was one of two things. It was going to be I was going to sprawl on him and punch him, or I was going to get kicked a bunch by him and then punch him. I had anticipated checking a few more of his kicks, but that boy kicked fast. It was after the third or fourth kick landed, on my legs or body. Nothing touched on the head, thankfully. I kind of figured he might be kicking a little faster than I'm able of blocking.
Yeah, that's always a scary situation.
But when I got my opportunity, when I got my opportunity, I took it, and it was all more or less according to game plan. You can hear my corners in that fight if you're watching on TV, and they're just play your game, Sam. Control. It's your fight. You know what's going on, and they weren't lying. It said for 8 weeks. That's what we were planning. My next opponent, Daniel Kelly, he's completely different game plan from Caesar. He's a three-time Olympian in judo. He's represented Australia in the last 3 or 4 Olympics, and he's placed as high as 7. So he's the real deal. he's 9-0 going into this fight. He's got some power too. I mean, I know judo's known for their takedowns and their explosion like that, but if you watch his fights, he throws with that, that silent aggression a lot of people have. So I've got to keep my hands up too. But I'm gonna be ready for him. I am. I think I know how he's gonna fight me. I mean, he's gonna want me on the ground, and I train with some of the best ground guys in the world. I train with black belts in judo. I train with Dan Henderson, who's a black belt in literally anything he wants to be a black belt in. I've got Terry Sokaju. I've got Tom Galicchio. He can try and beat me on the ground, but it's not going to happen. I'm going to be ready for it.
All right, great. Well, I know we at the show are really looking forward to that fight, and we're hoping for another one of those highlight reel knockouts. Mark, I'm going to pass it over to you. I know you have something for Sam.
Yeah, Sam, so being married as well, I watch a lot of reality TV. And knowing that both you and your wife are both reality TV veterans, a couple of quick questions I wanted to ask you there. And first is, was your wife's experience on America's Next Top Model, that sort of push you down that same road with Ultimate Fighter? And do you ever find sort of that reality TV sort of, I don't want to call it a stigma, but just experience that you had? Do you ever find it overshadows your MMA career or your status as an MMA fighter?
As far as her being on the show, probably deterred me from being on The Ultimate Fighter more than pushed me towards it. Her show was hard. Ultimate Fighter, everyone complains about it. That's been honest. Oh, it's so bad. No, it wasn't that bad. It was boring, but it wasn't that bad. Her show, she had every day, it was 8 to 12 hours where she'd be awake and not allowed to talk. She would be in a van, and the Tyra Banks, they wanted to have one camera crew instead of 3. So when the camera crew was sleeping, you weren't allowed to sleep. You weren't allowed to talk. And apparently the camera crew slept a lot for them. But everything she said, I mean, anything they ate, they got charged for. Anything that, I mean, it was, her show was more difficult than mine, and it sounded terrible. So it might have slowed me down a little bit in my pursuit of the Ultimate Fighter. But when the UFC calls, you don't say no. You say, yes, sir, can I have another? That's why when they called asking if I can be at 170, I said, oh okay, I guess, sure. I'll make it. I'll find a way. And as far as if it's slowed my momentum down a little bit, and I don't think it has. It's all part of the journey, and that journey has led to me having 2 knockouts and a knockout of the night in the UFC. And I don't know if that would have been possible had I not done the show. Because I had been trying to get into the UFC for years, but it just didn't happen. Finally, the show kind of gave me a little bit of notoriety, and then the MFC snagged me right off the show, and that's one of the biggest organizations in the world. I just loved fighting for them. And from the MFC, I went to the UFC, and so it all helped get me to where I am, and it'll help get me to where I'm going. I've just done something else that most people haven't been able to, and I'll just file it away in the memory bank and be able to tell my kids about it someday.
It is a very unique thing to see a couple not only stay together for so long, but stay together for so long, have her corner you, and also be, one of the most fabulous looking people on the face of the planet, and then you get to go kick some ass in the UFC. That's pretty amazing stuff. So we're finding out real quick that Sam Alvey has a very interesting life. And now, Kirby, I know that you're interested in one aspect of that life, and we're going to let you finish up the interview section.
Yeah, I'm just curious. So clearly, Sam Alvey is known for his sunny disposition. You're constantly smiling. You're totally happy to be where you're at and with your job. I'm wondering if any opponent has ever got to you at all. Has any opponent ever been able to actually wipe that smile off of your face and actually get to you before a fight?
Not a single one of them. And every person I've ever fought, they all say the same thing. I'm going to wipe that smile off your face. Not a one of them has. I've lost fights smiling before. I haven't lost many fights smiling, but I've lost smiling. I've been blessed in this life and this career. I've got a wonderful family. I've got a wonderful team. And like I said earlier, I'm in a sport that I'd be, making a career, making a life in a sport I would have done for free. Which isn't a great negotiating tool when it comes to signing contracts and everything, but as long as I keep winning, everything will be all right.
Yeah, you keep that whole "I do this for free"
just
thing to yourself when you're talking with Dana, right?
Yeah, but I do all these interviews, and I kind of say the same thing often enough, so I'm sure he's heard it. But no, the UFC's taking care of me beautifully. I couldn't have asked for stronger relationship with them, and it's been a blessed career so far. And people can want to try and irritate me. They can want to try and bring me down, but the only person that can do that's me. And I like what I do too much. I like who I do it with too much for that to happen.
All right, well, fantastic answers, and that brings us to the end of the interview section, so we're going to go to a quick break, and then we're going to go back to the round table, and we're going to talk a little bit about the fights that happened last night, and get Smilin Sam's opinion on weight cutting, because as clearly has been indicated during the show, this man has eaten a sandwich on the scale and also had to got down to 170, so we have a great guest to pick her brain. So you've been listening to Stand and Bang MMA Podcast. You can find us on standandbangmma.com. Hey, fight fans, welcome back to Stand and Bang Radio. I'm here with Mark Modeski.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Fred Kirby.
What's happening, fellas?
And Smilin Sam Alvey.
Still smiling on my end, guys.
Always smiling. That's fantastic. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about the fights that happened yesterday. Sam, I know you didn't get to watch the entire event, but I think everything will still be poignant and you'll be able to give us a hell of an opinion on it. What we're going to start off with, because you're here and it's come up so much, the weight cutting. What weight are you fighting at? What weight do you have to get to? How do you perform at that weight? We had Dustin Poirier up against Vieira. He came in his last fight, unfortunately, he dropped it to Conor McGregor. He has always talked about how difficult it is for him to get down to that featherweight division, so he popped back up to lightweight. He could take a punch on the chin, he was energetic, and the fight didn't last very long, and he ended it the way that everybody hoped that he ended it. So that's my question to you, Sam, right off the bat, is how did you feel having to fight at 170? How does it feel to have to fight above your weight class? And what kind of benefit could a lot of guys have by not doing these ridiculous weight cuts?
I felt terrible at 170. And I only did it for 2 fights when I was on the show. But it was a big cut. It was in a little bit of time. The UFC called saying, Sam, can you make 170? I said, sure, I'll give her my best. And so it was 40 pounds in 29 days I lost. Now, if you remember the show, I came out and it was ridiculous. It was the worst month of my life. I mean, I was doing 2 or 3 days at practice, and then I'd run between the practices I had to get it down. And it was not just getting down, I had to get it low enough walking around weight where I could kind of keep it down during the show. And if you remember the show, I came out and I knocked the boy out. I used a beautiful punch. He circled off, I hit him. That was all she wrote. But the next fight, I came out and I did nothing but get kicked in the face and punched a couple times. And it was the second weight cut that got me. Before the first one, I put on about 35 pounds overnight. So I made 170, overnight put on 35 pounds. Then it was 6 days later, I had to lose everything again. And that's what zapped me. So I mean, a weight cut, the size advantage can help, but it doesn't necessarily mean it will. But I do know, like I said, when I fought Jason Guida, he was bigger than me. He was bigger than I should have been fighting, and it felt that way in the cage. I squeaked away with a win, but I look at fights like that now. If I look at how big some of these 205ers are, they're just huge. Pat Barry said it best to me when I was on the show. He said, a happy fighter is a good fighter. He said, as long as you're comfortable cutting, cut. If you're not comfortable cutting, don't cut. And so I walk around off the show, or, off fighting weight, is I get up to about 220 once I start lifting and everything. And I cut down to 80, get down to 85. And when I step in the cage, I'm usually between 205 and 210. And I'm very comfortable doing that. But I've cornered people, I've worked with people who just don't cut weight well, that their mind shuts down or their body shuts down and they freeze up in the cage. So I at the end of the day, I think Barry said it best. A happy fighter is a good fighter.
Okay, before I move on to Mark, I want you to say that one more time for the fans so they understand. You gained 35 pounds in 24 hours, and then I also want to ask durability, like actually taking a shot. Do you believe that a bad weight cut can have you get knocked out easier?
Yeah, 35 pounds overnight. I went back to my room, and this was after a month. I mean, the entire month, I'll bet you I didn't eat 20,000 calories. And so I got off that scale. And I cut all the weight back at the hotel room, got to the scale after waiting like hours and hours. I finally got to run my weight, and I was still over by like 0.7. Oh my God. And you just kind of want to fall over and die. But I suited back up. I went into the parking lot of Vegas, and I ran for another, 30 minutes to lose that extra. I mean, and I say ran, but it was probably like drug. I drugged myself for another 35 minutes. But as soon as I was off that scale, I was just shoveling it in. Anything I could fit was going in. And I made it, but it was rough. It was rough.
So on the last point, do you believe that could affect somebody's durability? Do you think it's easier to knock somebody out?
Yeah. I do think it'd be easier to get knocked out that way. And I've talked to a couple, I'll say doctors, scientists, people that have studied it, and they say it's when you're cutting the water weight like we do, it's like you're losing it around your brain. He said you put it back in, you don't know that it's going to your brain. It's going to your lungs, it's going to your legs, it's going to your everywhere. And your brain, if you're fighting with a dehydrated brain, it doesn't take to rattle you.
All right, that's fantastic. I had never heard that before, and that is a fantastic point. The fluid around the brain is what cushions you from concussion, so if you get rid of that, easier to get knocked out. All right, Mark, what do you think? Do you think it's time for fighters to start paying attention to the percentage of weight that they lose?
We've talked about this a lot, Aaron and Fred, on the show, I think, recently, and we've gotten a lot of different fighters' opinions in terms of what they think makes the most sense. But I think Sam kind of brought it together in one sort of universal point, and the whole thing about, happy fighter's a good fighter at the end of, when all's said and done. And I think, that's a really good way of articulating it, because if some guys out there are good at it, they're okay doing it. Matt Hughes did it forever and a day, and he's a very successful fighter doing it. He was always a big fella going into that cage. And, I know it has later medical effects that can potentially hinder you in the later stages of life, but, he worked really well with it. Hendo's another guy who seemed to be really successful at doing the weight cut. But then you look at guys like Anthony Johnson, who, he was doing some good knockouts, but man, did he ever struggle to get there. Now that he's kind of walking around very natural at the weight that he's used to, I don't want to make predictions, but I think Jones is in for a real challenge there, because Johnson looked absolutely ridiculous against Gustafsson. I did not expect that type of a performance, and we see a lot of guys doing this. I think though I think it all comes down to how well a fighter can do it, how comfortable they are doing it, and a big part of it too is not being sort of absurd about it and going and dropping. What you're saying here, so I can't imagine having to drop that much weight in that short a period of time.
Now, Fred, I know you're very passionate about this. This is one of your big subjects. And to a note on Mark's thing, I don't agree with you. I don't think Anthony Johnson looked good at 170. I think he dropped some fights he should have won because of that weight cut. And Kirby, you and I have talked about this, so I'm going to hand it off to you and give you last word on this subject.
Yeah, I just think it seems like it's a lot more prevalent now. It seems like moving up a weight division is becoming the new weight cutting. Like you guys said, Anthony Johnson, man, seems to be the gold standard for this. He has moved up a couple weight divisions and had way more success at 205 than at 170, which is kind of insane, the power he still packs at 205. Even considering that he even made 170 is just insane, man. And then Dustin Poirier moved up to 55 and had a really good performance. Tim Means, not too long ago, did the same thing, moved up and had a really good performance. It just seems like a lot of these guys are starting to get the gist that staying at your natural weight and not depleting yourself of all those vital nutrients and water, which everybody needs to function, Jack. People cutting out that much water for days at a time, that's just not good for you, period, on any level. Frankie Edgar is another cat that fights right around his natural weight and has a huge amount of success. He's always usually undersized, and it doesn't really matter at all. He could probably cut to 35. I'm sure if Frankie got crazy, he could make flyweight. But to what end? You know what I mean? At 45 and 55, he's got a great gas tank. He doesn't get knocked out. I just think that extreme weight cuts are starting to be a thing of the past, and cats are getting the memo that cutting out all that weight and just killing yourself to make a weight isn't always the best thing in the world.
I would definitely like to see that. I would like to see the huge weight cuts be a thing of the past. It bothers me when I see the athletes that I enjoy watching getting on the scale and they look like Calvin Klein models. They have razor sharp cheekbones, and you know what I mean? You can see their hip bones. They almost look like, do you know what I mean? They've been through some sort of trauma, and then the next night you just have to wonder, do you know what I mean? Are we really seeing the real guy? Because some guys, they talk about how they're such a beast in the gym, and then they're just never really firing on all 8 cylinders in the cage. And so I'm hoping that these guys not cutting as much weight, I hope that this is a nice trend that is yet to come. So, and on that note, we're going to put the no cutting weight is the new weight cut trend to bed, and we're going to talk about the co-main event of UFC Fight Night, Mendes versus Lamas. Now, it is all over social media. It was a Vine. It was on Facebook. It is everywhere. Immediately, people did not like the decision between Iaquinta and George Masvidal, and I will tell you why. George Masvidal looked fantastic. In that first round, he took it to Iaquinta. He busted him up below his eye. Iaquinta was pouring blood. He had, other knobs on his face. He was taking kicks. George was switching stances so he could throw the left kick to the liver. And at the end of that first round, he had Iaquinta in a lot of trouble. Perhaps could have finished the fight. And then in the second and third round, I would have to say, honestly, maybe coasted a little bit. But at the same time, looked fantastic in the pocket. He was slipping and ripping. He was making Iaquinta miss all over the place. If you watch the fight, Al was aggressive, but he wasn't getting there. And just being aggressive isn't enough, as we intimated towards earlier in the show. It is a fight. What do you look like when you're done? Who won the fight? And clearly, George Masvidal won that fight, and then Iaquinta had some choice words for the crowd. So now in that weight division, and Kirby, I'm going to throw it over to you first after I give my thing. Here's my opinion. George Masvidal, if he doesn't get his win money, which clearly he should, but probably won't, I do believe what the UFC should do is give him a top 10 opponent. And I think at the same time, being, in my opinion, that Iaquinta lost, I think that we should only see him move up to, say, a number 12 guy, number 11. I don't think that he deserves that top 10 shot. I think that should go to George. What do you think, Kirby?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, listen, everybody is entitled to their own opinion as far as who won the fight, but in my opinion, Iaquinta lost that fight, Jack. No doubt about it. Like, I think the UFC will do that. They've been known to do that. When a fight is kind of so clearly, obviously, one way, Dana White's been known to kind of give that guy, when the same kind of situation happened with Ross Pearson and Diego Sanchez, they kind of came out and said, like, the judges kind of blew it, but we're going to give Pearson the more established fighter next. We're going to give him the next fighter like he won this fight. So I think they'll do that. I think it was a horrible, horrible decision. So I think they're going to give Masvidal, they're going to treat Masvidal like the winner, like they should. And, just back to touch on Iaquinta freaking out after the fight, man, it's kind of clearly obvious that I don't think they was booing him or his performance. It was a good fight, all things considered. He lost it, but it was a good fight. But, they were booing that horrible decision, man. So, yeah, I think the UFC will do the right thing, and they'll treat this fight the way it should be treated.
Okay, Sam, I've got a couple of questions for you on this whole thing. I know you're in a bigger weight class, and so maybe you don't pay attention to the little guys, but for the fans, I want you to tune them in on how important it is to win every fight now, especially in the Reebok era, and how one bad decision and not getting into that top 10 slot, that can make all of the difference in the world, correct?
Yeah, it's, Reebok's come out with their plan, and it's the top 10 make the most money, the top 20 make some money, and then everyone else will get something on the side. You want to be in that top 10. You want to be really impressing people because Reebok and the UFC will back you. I know the UFC has taken some guff for not paying their fighters what they're worth, but I've got nothing but positive things to say about the UFC. I think they pay us incredibly well, and to have the Reebok, idea out there is really impressive. I mean, I'm going to fight my ass off, pardon my language, but I'm going to fight it off to try and make that top 10, because I can only fight for so long, for as long as my body will let me, and I want to make every penny, make every fan, make every friend I can, and being in the top 10 will help get me there.
No, clearly. So a bad decision can cost you money, absolutely, and not making it up the ranks, if you lose that fight, even by a bad decision, cost you money. Now, one last little thing, since we're on the Iaquinta thing. I know that it's an emotional thing, but are you a little bit shocked that a fighter addressed the crowd in that manner?
Yeah. I mean, whether they boo you or not, they're paying your salary, and it is them that is paying your salary. There's no way of hiding it. And you're gonna. Would you ever tell your boss to F yourself? To go, kiss a shoe? You wouldn't do it. You bow your head and say, you know what? I'll do better next time. I'll finish him next time. And yeah, he should have more respect for his employment than that.
Absolutely. I think that we're all in agreement on that one. The fans pay the fans pay your salary, and they pay to be entertained. If they want to boo, hey, let them boo. It's nothing personal. Say your thing and get out of the cage. Mark, we're going to let you finish up on this one. Masvidal versus Iaquinta. What did you think?
It can be hard sometimes, I think, from the fans' perspective to really see what's going on. This is the whole thing that I like about, changing the rules in the judging, and going back to our previous conversation about things like damage playing a bigger factor. And realistically, I mean, it was a clear win, I think, as far as my perspective went for Masvidal. And I do think that he's going to be rewarded at the when all's said and done. I mean, Dana White has, as you said, a tendency to do this. He's done it over and over and over again. And it has nothing even to do necessarily with, he was robbed. Hey, he put on a great performance. You know what? Sometimes being elusive and getting away from that stuff. I mean, we saw Lyoto Machida. It worked for him in terms of his manner of fighting. It's not always about being the aggressor. As far as Iaquinta and his reaction to the crowd, I think, I kind of already, said my point of view on this. I feel for the guy, because I think we all sometimes say things in the heat of the moment that we don't actually mean. And I'm sure today he's probably kicking himself a little bit for what he had actually said to everybody. You're on the biggest stage in the world. You're a professional athlete that there's thousands of people wish that they were probably out there for. Just show respect for the sport and for the game. That's it.
All right. So that is going to bring us to the last subject of the night. We had our main event it was Chad Money Mendez versus Ricardo Lamas. And in this one, Chad came out and looked fantastic. At the same time, Ricardo Lamas was looking very good right up until that overhand right clipped him on the top of the head, and then there was just no recovering from that. So there is no question on the win. Chad Mendez looked great. Ricardo Lamas looked great right up until he went to sleep, more or less. So my question that I'm going to pose to everybody is, what's next? Do we want to see the trilogy between Aldo and Mendez if Aldo is able to get past Conor McGregor? And what would we like to see next for Ricardo Lamas? Me personally, I believe that Aldo is going to retain the title. I think that Conor McGregor is going to be stopped by Aldo, and then I think he's going to be open for an opponent. So this is what I would like to see. This is the only time where I've seen a person improve so much that I do want to see a trilogy. I would love to see Mendez get back to that title and try one more time against Aldo. And if Aldo retains the title and Conor McGregor needs a fight, I would like to see McGregor get dropped down to a guy like Ricardo Lamas to test his skills. Kirby, what do you think?
I'm not a massive fan of trilogies, man, unless it's really, really called for. The second fight with Aldo and Mendez was very good. The first one, not so much. I'm not saying I wouldn't want to see a trilogy. I'm just saying that I would like to see Mendez probably get one more big win. Now, clearly, it all depends on what happens with Jose and Conor McGregor. If Conor wins, then you could do Mendez-Conor, and that's fine. But if Jose keeps the belt, in order to do that trilogy, I would like to see Mendez get another win. Frankie Edgar's got a huge fight coming up with Uriah Faber. I think that Frankie will win that fight. Frankie's a huge name. I would like to see Chad Mendez fight somebody like that. And if he can beat somebody like Frankie, then go ahead and just do the trilogy. At that point, you could go ahead and get away with it. As far as Ricardo Lamas goes, I think this is a massive momentum killer for him, man. I wouldn't say it's going to drop him down all that far, but I think he's going to get dropped down to probably maybe fighting a 5th or 6th ranked type guy. I think this was not real great for Lamas in the grand scheme of things.
Okay, so do you have any pick on who you'd like to see him against? How about Cub Swanson?
Yeah, Cub Swanson will be interesting. I guess if Conor McGregor happens to lose to Jose Aldo, I could do that fight too. Obviously, you know, with you and your Conrad, they have a nice.
You caught that, huh?
They have a nice little beef built up. So
Conrad McGillicuddy.
Yeah, exactly. So that could be a fun fight, man. If Conor loses that fight, that would be a fun bounce back for Ricardo, and it's got a little steam and hype behind it too. So.
All right, Sam, I'm going to ask you this first before I pass this over. Do you watch the little guys, being that you're 185 pounds, sometimes 225 pounds? Do you even pay attention to the little guys in the UFC?
I do. I've got my favorites. Frankie Edgar's probably my favorite little guy. Just love every fight he has. Aldo is the most impressive of all the little guys. And as long as I got your ear for a second, Conor is gonna be the worst title fight in the history of the UFC. Jose is gonna destroy him.
Yes.
I mean, he doesn't stand a prayer. He better keep running his mouth because it's gonna be embarrassing. Yeah, he's gonna be. And on top of, I don't think there's anyone in the top 5 that Conor stands a chance with.
Sam,
so that's my personal prediction.
Sam, you just became my favorite guest ever.
Oh, it's ridiculous. He fought Seaver. He got taken down twice. He got tripped 3 times with leg kicks. You don't think Aldo saw that in his camp? He never got held down, but it was Seaver. I mean, he was never going to get held down, but his butt touched the canvas like 5 times in a round and a half. He doesn't stand a prayer.
All right, fantastic. I love that, Kirby. Ha ha ha. In your face, Sam's on my side. And and on that note, Sam, okay, what would you like to see next for Money Mendez? What would you like to see next for Ricardo Lamas?
I have no real opinion on Lamas. He's always a good fight, so I'd give him a lower rank guy to let him win that one, then get him back up in the top 2-3. Mendez, I could see a trilogy with him. I don't even really remember the first fight, so it'd only be a sequel for me. But he really has come a long way. He He looks like a champion, Mendez does. He fights like a champion. So I think for the, it could be a good fight. And I'm usually not that big on trilogies. Usually they're kind of a letdown, but I think Mendez just keeps looking better and better.
Mark, we're going to let you have the last word before we wrap up the show.
I'm just going to give sort of my opinion in terms of what's next for each. Although, just to sort of touch on what everybody else has been talking about, I'm about 90% sure that Aldo is going to beat McGregor. Can easily be wrong. So who knows? Who knows what'll happen, but I'm pretty sure Aldo's going to win that. As far as Lamas, I do like the Cub Swanson matchup that you mentioned, Aaron, but I like this sort of McGregor idea, knowing that he's likely going to lose. Because again, there's a little bit of heat going on there with him. McGregor was trashing him after his loss and whatnot. So, I think that there's some good potential for a nice little matchmaker there. Get some eyes on the screen. And, I like this. I like the Mendez Aldo matchup, assuming again, everything kind of falls out as planned or as everybody's predicting here. I think it could work out. Let's put it this way. I think Mendez looked like a much better fighter in this last one than I've seen him in some other fights. If you watch it really closely, when he starts to kind of close the gap and whatnot, he's much more disciplined in terms of going in for the kill. He just didn't go in with savage fists and just try and destroy him. He took his time. He kind of waited. He, let Lamas kind of get his feet and then took him down with punches again and again. It wasn't just mindless sort of arm swinging. He looked like he's a more disciplined fighter than I've seen him in the past. I think he could maybe give Aldo a little bit of trouble. So it could be a good fight to watch. I'd like to see that one.
Except for Fred Kirby over at Gem City Fighting, who believes that Conor McGregor will one day be the king of the universe. The three of us have him losing to the current champion, so that makes me feel pretty good that I've got a UFC fighter on my side. Just saying, Fred. We'll talk about it later.
Not just losing, getting his ass whooped.
There you go, getting his ass whipped. I love this guy. So on that note, all right, Sam, before we have to wrap up the show, tell the fans what's the date of your next fight, how can they watch it, and how can they get a hold of you on social media?
My next fight, I'm fighting May 10th against Daniel Kelly. It'll be main card, but on Fight Pass. So that's always, I always like the Fight Pass cards. And if you want to hit me up, I'm on Smilin Sam at, Twitter. And then Facebook, I've got a great fan page. I'm always posting videos. I got a cool video coming up in the next week or two that you might all want to see. And that's Smilin Sam, Professional Fighter. I do my best to get back to everyone that tweets or Facebooks me. So hopefully I'll talk to y'all soon.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks for being on the show. And Mark, how do they find you on Twitter?
You can find me at LastWordMark on Twitter. Follow me. I always follow you back.
All right, Kirby, same thing. How do they find you?
Yes, sir. Follow me at Kirby_MMA and at Gym City Fighting.
Now, we have a couple of new facets on our show. We finally have a YouTube channel. Stand and Bang MMA Podcast. Really easy to remember. You can find us at Twitter at Stand in Bang Radio. And now the show in all formats is going to be at www.standinbangmma.com. So go ahead and go over to the website. Check it out. It's very simple. You have all the options. You got iTunes, you got a streaming player, you got YouTube, everything that you need right at your fingertips with all of the previous episodes. And please stay tuned next week. We are going to have legendary cutman Stitch Duran with us.